Hello everyone, and welcome to today's session on academic writing. So firstly, we're going to think about the style needed for academic writing. Academic writing is fundamentally formal in tone and vocabulary. It doesn't sound like a conversation, and it definitely doesn't include slang or text speak. So please just don't. It's objective, by which I mean it has a clear and distinct purpose. You are writing to answer a set question and pass your assignment. It also means that you're presenting your arguments in an unbiased form. You could be discussing a controversial or emotive topic, and you need to create distance and remain impartial. The words and tone you choose are how you achieve this. In all cases, you need to consider your reader and make your discussion as clear and concise as possible. Avoid unnecessary description and sentences that are too long. Ideally, you want to have a mix of sentences, so short and long ones. For example, make a direct statement in a fairly short sentence, and then follow that with a longer sentence, which provides evidence and proof to support your original statement. And finally, unless you've been asked to write a reflective piece, you need to write in the third person. Do not use the term I. This helps create that distance that we mentioned previously. We're going to look at a series of examples. I have chosen this area because. Straight away, we've got an I. We're in the first person. So let's change that to this area is of particular interest because. I hope you can see you're saying the same thing, but you've taken out that I. You've created that distance, and it sounds much more formal. I am going to come to the conclusion has the same problem. So we're going to change that to the discussion will conclude by suggesting. Our next example is the research that Lloyd did isn't very good because. Now, we want you to be using sources and evidence from a whole range of different material. We want you to analyse it and critique it, and that can sometimes be quite awkward as it feels personal. The level of formality in language helps to create that distance and bring back that level of impartiality. So we could change that to Lloyd's study overlooks. We're still saying that there's an issue with Lloyd's work that we're going to investigate, but I hope you can see it's far less personal. And finally, the articles I have read say that. Now again, you want to prove to your reader that you've done the reading, you've done the background research, but that I has snuck back in. So we'll take that out so it becomes literature on this topic suggests. I hope you can see that just by making a few changes, we've had quite an impact on what we're saying and how we're saying it. We've created a level of formality that sounds much more professional. So how do you get there? One of the easiest ways is to proofread your work. So let's talk about proofreading. Proofreading is not editing, okay? So if you're anything like me, you'll do your research, do the reading, you'll make a plan, you'll write that first draft, and it'll be awful. And then you go back over and over again, changing things, tweaking things. You might change your structure, move around some paragraphs. You'll have various versions of that essay until you get to a final draft that you're happy with. That's the writing and editing process. At that point, you want to proofread before you submit the final draft. Now, personally, I have to print out everything that I proofread because for some reason, when I read on screen, it's like my brain fills in the gaps and I see what I think should be there rather than what is actually there. So I print it out and read it aloud and go through it with a pencil, and at that point, the mistakes are jumping out at me. So at that stage, be asking yourself a series of questions. Have I used the term I anywhere? Is there anywhere where the phrasing sounds particularly awkward? Is there anywhere that sounds more casual? Or have I been too descriptive in one section and not analytical enough? All these questions enable you to amend your work before you submit. Another way of developing your academic style is to have a look at how other writers say things. So while you're doing your background reading and research, obviously it's important to look at what someone is saying, but also take the time to look at how they're saying it. Different subjects have different styles, so if you've got some key writers in your field, ask yourself, how are they phrasing things? What vocabulary are they using? How are they getting their point across? And then try and emulate or copy that style. Another thing you can do is go to the Manchester Phrase Bank. Now, this is an excellent and highly recommended resource that deals with academic vocabulary. There are pages and pages of examples of how to phrase things in slightly different ways, how to begin sentences, how to write critically and cautiously, how to introduce sources. If you ever get writer's block or you don't know how to get started, head over to the Phrase Bank. Using the Phrase Bank, we could rewrite these two examples. Instead of saying, so far, lots of research has looked at, you could say, the existing literature on X is extensive and focuses particularly on, and you would just change that X to whatever your topic is. And the second example, what's surprising in the data is that, could become, this finding was unexpected and suggests that. You're probably all familiar with the idea of structuring your assignment with an introduction, main section, and conclusion. You can do the same thing for individual paragraphs. This comes back to the short and long sentences we were talking about earlier. So you could have your initial or topic sentence be a statement, such as, attending study skills workshops is vitally important for university students. This is the point you're trying to make. And then you back that up with your supporting sentences. Jones, 2008, reported that study skills teaching can help students to improve their assignments. This was supported by Tudor, 2009, who found that study skills workshop attendance was associated with higher degree class. You've got slightly longer sentences here, and you're bringing in the evidence and proof to support your initial statement. And you can round all that off with a concluding sentence. Together, this would suggest that participation in core skills development training can influence student success. This is a summary of what you've been saying. Now, this isn't necessarily going to be possible for every paragraph within your work, but if you can build this structure down to paragraph level, then your writing would really benefit from it. So moving on to consider critical writing. It's so important to be more analytical than descriptive. It's one of the top complaints that academics have about students' writing, that there's too much description and not enough analysis or evaluation. It's not enough just to repeat what your sources say. You can use phrases and words to show that you've evaluated and connected them, that you've understood them and their place within the wider context of your topic. So I've got some examples for you. A groundbreaking discovery has been made in research into aging and death. Just by using the phrase groundbreaking, you're showing your reader that there is something that you have identified as important about this piece of research that is different to other research in the area. Similarly, in 1997, Erkan published a significant piece of research on open structures in bridges. The use of the term significant is showing your reader that you're making a judgment call. Based on all the different pieces of research that you've read, you have identified that there is something significant and important about Erkan's. And finally, in his important work, Abaka challenges current techniques for data interpretation. So again, your opinion is coming through. You've recognized that Abaka has something important to say. This example goes further. The use of the word challenges demonstrates to your reader that you have recognized that not only does Abaka have an important piece of work, but that it is different to other pieces of research, that he's taking a new approach. Consider this example. James and Rose have said that a shortage of trained professionals would have a significant impact on the UK hospitality industry. James also says that this would have a negative effect on the UK economy. I mean, this is okay, but all the writer is doing is telling you the facts. They are just telling you what James and Rose says. There is no analysis or evaluation here. This is purely description. So if we add some of that analysis in, we get, whilst both James and Rose agree that a shortage of trained professionals would have a significant impact on the UK hospitality industry, James's more detailed study goes further and argues that this would also have a negative effect on the UK economy. However, one key issue with James's argument is that, unlike Rose, he. So here we've added in analysis. We're telling the reader that James and Rose agree on something, and then we're going further. We're demonstrating that we've recognised that James has a more detailed study and that there is an important difference between the two sources. So it's important to use critical language throughout your assignment. Consider this example. The graphics that we come across in hospitals, such as images and directional signs, are vitally important for helping patients and visitors to find their way. To be useful, signs should be clear, easy to read, and accurate. The effectiveness of signs is based on many other factors too, such as people's thought processes and how good they are at following the directions. Lots of studies have been carried out on signs, and these have also explored how people find their way around bigger medical facilities. These days, people also use mobile phones, apps and sat-navs when moving through these larger buildings. This has changed the way people use signs. So this example isn't using any critical language, and I hope you can see a few other problems creeping in. So here we've added in some critical language. Successful signage in hospitals is more than putting up signs, because most of the time signage cannot overcome any wider problems with the building structure. The effectiveness of signs is based on many factors, not least the psychology of how people find their way. A considerable number of studies have been published on this subject, although the most prominent is Kevin Lynch's landmark text, The Image of the Hospital. He noted how people use mental mapping to navigate hospitals and coined the important term wayfinding. Despite broad research into the subject of how we find our way, however, there has been little discussion of how technology and digital connectivity has begun to shape this. So let's pull out some of that critical language. We're saying things like more than, not least. If we're saying that a number of studies have been carried out, then we need to prove that. We need to be listing them and citing them. We're giving our opinion about what research is the most prominent. We're recognizing and highlighting that there are seminal pieces of literature within our topic. We're pulling out key elements of that. Alongside all of that, we're saying that despite all of the research that has gone on beforehand, there's a gap. And that gap is something we could fill in our research and discussion on the topic. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Our email address is skills@wlv.ac.uk. We have more information and support on our web pages, and if you want to talk to someone in person, you can either set up a one-to-one appointment or speak to library staff through Assist, our chat service. Thank you for listening.